Welcome to another Technique Hump Wednesday. Today we are going to be working with the shadow nose technique. I'm starting by stamping an image with a Memento London Fog ink. This ink is really great to use with Copic markers. It doesn't move when you color over the top of it. And I like the London Fog gray because it makes it look like a more realistic flower than a harsh black line. Instead of a simple single image as I did in the blog post, I'm going to do a complex image. I'm going to layer and mask off this flower 4 separate times. So I've stamped the image on a piece of copy paper and made a couple masks just by cutting out that image right inside the line. So we'll place those masks on top of the stamped images that have already been put on the paper and then stamp over the top of those directly. You can see I've got a little purple stamping pad underneath this. You could use a cushy mouse pad or something like that. Because we're working on watercolor paper, you really need to make good contact with the paper because it's got that, cold pressed texture, and so I want to make good contact with it. So that's why I've got a stamp pad, a little mouse pad underneath. If you haven't done masking before, this is a really great way to get multiple layers, a very layered look with a simple one-dimensional image. Even though we've accomplished a layered image, it still has a very one-dimensional look to it, and that's what we'll change by using the shadow technique. Coming up next. This is a printout of the gray colors that Copic provides. The cool grays have a blue tint to them. Neutral is just a neutral gray. Toner has almost a green gray to it, and then the warm grays have a yellow tone to them. Because I'm pretty much covering up all of the gray with other color, I'm just going to use the neutrals, and I'm going to use from N4 up to N0, so from the darkest being N4. So to start with the image, I'm going to take the area with N4 and flick where on the right side of the image where the light is not following, let's say, and just do the darkest color, that N4, flicking outward where the flowers, the two flowers intersect with the lower flower. So this is like the darkest shadow in the image. Now we quickly change to an N3, and I'm going to color all of the areas around the two topmost flowers. So wherever those two topmost flowers fall over the other two flowers is where the N3 color is going to get flicked in. Now I'm going to back off the shadow a little bit with an N2 and start going around the edge of the topmost petals on every one of the flowers. So we're flicking now along the topmost edge of the top petals. And as you can tell, as we go, the shadows are getting lighter and lighter and lighter because at the top of the flower is where the most light is falling. Then we'll switch to an N1. And with the N1, we're only going to outline, or we're going to flick outward from the center of the flowers, from where the stamens are, outward. We're going to do a little blending for anything that looks like it needs it on the outermost petals. Just anything that looks like it needs it, and then we're going to flick outward from the stamen out to really create almost like a pincushion look on every one of the flowers. And then the lightest color, N0, is used to go around and get the petals on the topmost layer that have a little bit of an overlap. If they're falling underneath the other petals, then I'm just going to trace around that line to give them a bit more dimension on the topmost flower. But since it is the topmost flower, we're using, once again, N0, which is a very, very light gray. And that'll just bring that out just one more step. Anywhere in the outlying petals where I want to just take things and maybe blend them a little bit more, or I don't want things to be white on the outmost layers unless they're all the way to the edge because they're not getting as much sun, let's say, not getting as much light there. The nice thing about a flower like this is it's the same stamp image over 4 times, so you get really familiar with where things are and where you need to do your shading after you've done the first one. So I'm just going around each one of these and doing the same exact thing and just doing a little bit of blending. but for the most part, the stamp tells you what you need to do. You can see that a petal is layered underneath another petal, and therefore we outline it just a little bit to bring it out, like in this one here. You'll probably spend the most time with your lightest color, such as I am with the Zen 0, because this is where you don't want things to be white, but you want things to have a little bit of shading. And it's just so easy to add just a touch everywhere you want to put it. You can always put more in. Now I'll take that same N0 and I'm going to use the chisel tip this time for the really dark areas that I put in at the very beginning with the N4 and N3. And you can use the chisel tip and just kind of saw back and forth. That's why it's a good name for it, is a chisel, because you can go back and forth and over those lines you did before, and it'll get rid of the little, looks like grass, you know, the little carrot tops on all of those brush strokes. And it just takes that and diffuses it just a little bit further without getting rid of it. Just a softener, if you will. It kind of blends a little bit more and you get a nice soft diffused shadow. So just saw it back and forth over the top of the darkest lines. So here's our finished image with all of our grays put in. It's almost pretty just as it is right now, even before we've done any coloring, and that's the joy of it. You can see before it was just very one-dimensional. And one-dimensional doesn't look very realistic, but the moment you add in the grays, boom, it just pops and comes to life. Just wait until we add color.